Hey, so this is my first video, the first time recording myself speaking into the camera actually, and I just wanted to explore the possibility of talking about things that are generally considered uncool to talk about, taboo, crazy, conspiracy-minded. Sometimes the things that I really want to say tend to be a little bit spicy, and I want to balance that in a way that is not offensive. And I also want to really emphasize the fact that, first of all, I'm not just a head, I actually am sitting here in a chair, and it looks kind of weird because the lighting in here is weird, so I'll adjust this while I talk. At any rate, I definitely promote nonviolence. At the same time, I also believe in the art of self-defense, and I certainly do believe in the U.S. Constitution, the law, the art of liberty in its truest sense, without discrimination, and all amendments of the Constitution, including the second, and in practice of free speech. I'd like to say a couple things. I've had a very strong feeling since I was probably about 5 years old that the Nazis would be a problem in the future in America. This is a very unpopular thing to tell people, but I remember very, very clearly being at the kitchen table in my onesie pajamas with my dad, and I was and really am in many ways still a daddy's girl. Loved my daddy so much, especially when I was little. We were very, very close. And I'm eating my oatmeal, and I say to my father, it just got really dark, interesting. I say to my father, "Dad, what are we going to do when the Nazis come?" And my dad's over making some peanut butter toast on the kitchen counter, and he doesn't know exactly how to respond, but this was the beginning of me having premonitions and understandings of things that would happen in America from the time I was extraordinarily young. I knew that I had a mission. I knew where I was from. I had a very strong conscience and also a sassy warrior spirit, which can certainly come across different ways to different people depending on your perspective. And I became an activist, a humanitarian. I went to Washington, D.C. after graduating from college in 3.5 years, although I did attend a summer session. And I do like to get down to business when my heart, mind, and spirit are set on a goal. I was an activist in Washington, D.C. for just under 2 years. I lobbied against the FDA approving dangerous drugs that were causing cancer. I worked at a DC Rape Crisis Center. I helped to direct and develop an inner-city after-school education program with a wonderful lady by the name of Janice Williams, who I hope to reconnect with in the future. She's someone that made a big impact on my life. And that was a wonderful job. That's where I was working when the Columbine Massacre happened in Littleton, Colorado, where I was born. What's interesting about that is I knew that something very dark would come to Littleton at one point. People did not deal with humanitarian issues, and I do believe that there's a big connection there. I then went to Columbia University. I mean, it was pretty amazing for me personally to work my whole life, and I took my life very seriously. I had not experimented with any drugs, had never had maybe 2 boyfriends at that point in my life as a master's student at an Ivy League school in New York City. I went to Columbia University to seek my master's in social work and became a whistleblower long before I ever knew that that was a term or heard the term or had any familiarity with that term whatsoever. I was placed at an orphanage in Spanish Harlem called Incarnation Children's Center. I knew that the children were being abused. I reported it. I investigated it. After reporting, I was given a pink slip told that if I didn't get my vaccines for the semester, that I would not get credit for my first semester of graduate school. And I reported to the nurse's office, at which point I was vaccinated with God knows what. And although I had had health problems before, which I'll cover in another chapter, my health dramatically nosedived after that vaccine at Columbia University. And within 6 months of that vaccine, a doctor at Columbia told me that I had cancerous cells in my cervix, and I went to get a facial at a beauty spa one day, and the woman told me she thought I had cancer on my face. So within a day, I was ushered to a doctor's office where they took a chunk out of my face and burned it without even asking my permission, honestly. I didn't even know what was happening. Before I knew it, I smelled burning flesh. They were cutting chunks out of my face, and they burned it closed. All in a day. It was quite a day in the Big Apple by myself. I reported to the dean of the social work department, who is another woman I really admire and hope to reconnect with. Her name's Barbara, and her last name escapes me right now. She was a beautiful woman. She was a lesbian from Germany, which gave me hope that she would think outside of the box. And she told me that she believed that there was something going wrong at that orphanage. And she asked me why I hadn't reported sooner, and I told her that I wasn't apt towards being a snitch and was hoping to solve the problem on my own. It's a lot of information, and it's a little emotional for me, so it's a little awkward. But I was investigating the child abuse that had been reported to me by one of my clients. She was a 12-year-old girl, developmentally 3. They told me that she was developmentally disabled because the HIV had attacked her brain. Turns out it's really not necessarily the case, which I'll cover in a moment. As I was conducting an investigation, which I happened to understand how to do probably partly genetically because my father was a police officer and he was also an FBI trained investigator for complex grand jury trials. And I had actually even attended a few investigations with my father, so I'm quite good at intuitive process combining research and investigation. Suddenly I was receiving an F grade for my residency program, even though I completed all the cases that were assigned to me and had all the children that were assigned to me resolved to return to family or adopted. So what happened was I needed to present my case to Columbia Court at Columbia University, which I did. And I prepared stacks of documents that were about this high. And I whited out all of the children's names to protect their identity. And it didn't matter. No one in the round table in the court hearing that I was taken to at the university, no one even looked at my documents. They didn't listen to what I had to say. They just shoved the documents around the table like this and maybe flipped a corner up, but mostly not. And I was told that I would be failing this semester. And I would only be permitted to stay and retake my semester at the friendly Ivy League cost, which is a lot. My family wasn't rich. I mean, I come from a good family, but we're not financially well off. I mean, it was, it was a lot for me to go to that school and try to support myself in New York City. My grandfather had set up an education fund for me, which was a gift and an incredible blessing. But it was a struggle to support myself on the stipend that I had to live, and I took out some loans. So I wasn't going to retake the semester, but most of all, on principle alone. Why should I take a semester over at this Ivy League education when there's issues of abuse being overlooked and it's an integrity issue? They told me that I needed to apologize and recant my accusation in order to stay at Columbia University and finish my master's of social work. And needless to say, I said, no, thank you. What I really wanted to say was something different, but I'm practicing nonviolent communication and speaking with the presence of my faith and my spiritual belief system. And so I will keep it G-rated because that's what I teach my kids to do, the children that I work with, who I love, foster children and orphans. And that's what we need to aspire towards. So we'll leave it at that. I had to leave Colombia. I became very ill. I entered into a different chapter at that point in my life, which I will cover in another moment, but that's a long story. What I will say is that I had supernatural health problems. I had head pain ever increasing, which did start when I was young, but took a nosedive after Colombia. And I suddenly could hear just strange small actions all the way down the street. One day I thought someone was bouncing a basketball off of my windowsill. It was so loud, I was so sure, and I stepped out onto the balcony of my St. Mark's apartment and looking around, found that the street was empty for the most part at that time, and there was a young teenage boy playing a video game down the street, and I could see him putting his hands like this on a button, and that was the sound that I was hearing. So I was having these really, really outrageous symptoms, and was for the most part unable to work and really disabled and just struggling to figure out how I was going to live my life. This was really at the beginning of my life. It appears that someone's calling. It'd be great if it was Jesus, but it's probably not. I'll have to continue this later.